so we'll see whether she's ready to join us. She might be just a little bit late. Okay, so we've got Sandra, Dean, Braun, Joyce currently on the Etherpad, and Blair is one of the Mozillians that I met last week at NetHui in New Zealand, and he's a developer from Mozilla, and he works from India. He's working on different things, but he came along and he supported me with some of the Open Badges stuff, so it was great to have him there. So it'll be cool and see if we can tap into some of his expertise today as well. All right, so currently we've got one viewer. That's a little bit disappointing. I'll just say that everyone's still having dinner and waiting to come on. All right, I'll just get us started, and maybe just a brief intro from the three of us, and we can see whether Natalie's going to join us. I'm also hoping that Richard Jones from New Zealand is going to join us here on the panel kind of area as well. So I'm Joyce Seitzinger. I have my own company called Academic Tribe, and I've got a very strong interest in Open Badges, which started when I was working in higher education, and I feel like there's a lot more we can be doing. And started the OBANZ community calls because the other community calls that Open Badges runs are in the middle of the night for us in Australia and New Zealand. So that's just a little bit about me. Bron, you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm Bron Stuckey, and I'm focusing the last couple of years on gamification and how far we can take that and its relevance. And I'm super excited about Open Badges and the whole notion of interoperability in our educational framework. So I'm also a consultant, and I work for projects at Arizona State University and here in Australia.
Thank you. And Dean, you want to just do a quick intro?
Yeah, my name's Dean Grimm. I'm also in Sydney, and I'm new because Joyce has kindly invited me to join this badge as a participant with the video screen for the first time. I work as a learning designer, and I'm also doing a PhD in families and video gaming and gamification. So obviously Open Badges fits right down the center of my alley right now.
Great. And I'm really grateful that the two of you have put your hand up to help me run these sessions, both because of your extensive networks in education and also your experience in education and gamification, and also because it can be really kind of hard to run it by yourself. So to have some extra hands on deck and have some people to brainstorm with, etc. And if there are other people out there who are joining us and would be keen to help out with that, I'm very keen to hear from you, and particularly some people from New Zealand. I met some really keen Open Badges enthusiasts last week, so I'd be keen from anyone from New Zealand to come and join us. So just a little bit about the OBANZ community and what the three of us have kind of decided that we wanted to do in order to kind of push it a little bit further. So before, a few months ago, we were running them once a month. And then I went overseas, and et cetera, and because there was no backup, they then kind of fall by the wayside. So it's great to have you guys on, and we've decided to be a little bit more ambitious and have a hangout twice a month on the first Wednesday and on the third Wednesday of every month. And that we would run these by, with the first one being a generic one, so it'll be kind of like today. It's basically an open space for anyone who wants to ask questions or has topics or wants to raise that. So quite informal. And then for the second one on the third Wednesday of every month, to be more around a case study. So I'll invite someone who's been running an Open Badges project or who's got a particular project that maybe they're wanting to start and that they would like to get feedback on. And I'll just turn that off. And so that one will be more around that one project and basically learning from someone's project. So that's what we're thinking about at the moment. And of course, this can all change because it belongs to the community, and if people want different things more often, less often, then we've got that flexibility. So we're running it as a Google Hangout on air, which means we're limited in the number of people who can be in the room and talking at the same time. But it doesn't mean that everybody else is excluded from participating. What we've done is we've created an Etherpad, and you should have seen the tweets coming by on both my handle, Cat's Pajamas NZ, and also on the OBANZ handle, which is OB_ANZ. To a link to that Etherpad. So it is tiny.cc/OBANZ OBANZ community call, OBANZ CC03, because it is the third community call. All right, so that's tiny.cc/OBANZ CC03. So if you go there, you can actually join us, and you can see the agenda for the, and if anyone's out there listening and who's got Twitter handy, please go into my stream and give that tweet a boost, or just share that link again with someone. And what you'll find there is you'll find an Etherpad, and the Etherpads are what's being used for the Mozilla Open Badges community calls as well. So we're trying to get a little bit of consistency across the time zones. And you'll find the entire agenda there for today, and you'll also find a chat window where everyone can chat with each other, and we'll be in and out of there as well. One of us will be keeping an eye on that while the discussion in here in the Google Hangout on air is happening. So I can see that people are tapping into that, which is great. Just one thing, you'll be assigned a color the first time that you go to that page, and then you can actually go in at the top and then change your name. So click on the thing that's next to your color. Then you can change your name, and then the pad will actually show which comments and chat submissions have been yours. I'm just going to do that, and let me see, and just make sure that I'm not missing out on anything. So I'm going into the Etherpad, and right, the next thing on our agenda is to do the roll call. Oh, here we go. And as you can see in the agenda itself, starting from line 31, so this is one of the things that I love about Etherpad. From line 31, you can just refer to the line number, is a roll call, and everyone is just adding the details there. Now, this is an open document, so add as many details or as few as you are comfortable with. But Twitter handle is helpful because that way we can find you again. Email if you're willing to share as well, and a little bit about your interest in open badges. Okay. Now, I've talked about the reasons for OBANZ. I've talked about our kind of intentions about when we want to meet. And that today is going to be the open space. So with the open space, if you've got some things that are preying on your mind about open badges, or just something that you would like more clarification on, etc., then I would ask you to scroll down to line 72, and you'll see that we've created a space there for open space. And you can just add a topic. So you can just go in and just add a topic and put your name behind it so that we know who's wanting to talk about it. And what we'll do is we will pull you into the... ooh, a whole bunch of people just came in. That's great.
Yeah, it worked!
Was that you?
There are people out there. It's not just us. I'm going to call my therapist right away.
There's 8 viewers, so, and I know that one of those is Natalie, who's already gone into the Etherpad. Natalie, I did send you an invite, which should have showed up in your Google Plus, but just tell me if there is a problem with that. So I'll just put something in the chat window down there as well.
So if you are new to Mopad, you do need to just put your name in the space at the top so that you won't be unnamed. And welcome to Blair, Natalie, and Nigel, who've joined us.
Nigel Robertson. Yay, Nigel! Hi, Nigel. We're still keen for people to come and join us here in the room. If you're happy to join us, just type it in the chat and I'll pull you in. So what we've done is to kind of kickstart the open space discussion. We've thought up some topics that we're quite keen to discuss with other people who are interested in open badges in Australia and New Zealand. And then, we're happy to kind of give it over to you, and we're also looking for your contributions to that. So we got Leo. Oh, hi, Leo. Nice to see you.
And Brandon, who is just down the road from me.
Ah.
I did see Brendan Jones on the Etherpad as well, very briefly. So
I see Grant McDonald has just come in. So just for those people who are just coming into the room and who are just going to find the Etherpad, I see that we've got about 4 people unnamed. Oh, Eunice, I see you figured it out. Great. But you can just, it's just right in the top in that light blue area. Just click on that and you'll be able to change the name that's been assigned to you, and that will make it clear to all of us who you are. So in the top right-hand corner. So one of the other things that you can find here on this Etherpad, we tend to kind of roll it over, is just some generic resources from the Mozilla team about open badges. One of the things that I haven't done yet, but I will do it later on, is to actually add the links to the previous community calls. So when we do it on the Google Hangout on air, automatically gets recorded and put on our YouTube channel, so you can always go back and find it. And if you are new to open badges, then I would highly recommend going back and reviewing our very first community call, where we had Doug Belshaw, who is the web literacy lead at Mozilla, but previously worked on open badges, and he's currently working on establishing. In fact, it's going to be rolled out, I think, from tomorrow or maybe next week. A whole web literacy set of standards that will be accredited with badges. So, and those will be aimed at teachers mainly. So you can go in and just earn badges for various things like being aware of open licensing and being aware how you can share information, etc. So great work being done by them there. So we had him on the first call, and also Jade Forrester, who is the community manager for open badges, who does an amazing job and never really seems to sleep. And she gave us a good overview of all the various projects that have been going on, including Cities of Learning. So, so if you're interested in hearing more about it and basically getting a general introduction to open badges, then you can go back to that first community call and listen to it. It's all recorded. Okay, so who else have we got? So we've got Eunice, and thanks, Dean, for just facilitating that over there, and Leo as well. So like I said, if you've got particular questions or a particular topic that you would like to talk about, go into the open space, which you can find from line 79 on the Etherpad, and add your topic there. Now with that, I'm going to turn it over to Braun, who's kind of going to get us started on that first topic, and I'm just going to check with Natalie and with Nigel. And please, if anybody else is keen to join in on this topic, then just put it in the chat window. And hi, Gary. Just put it in the chat window on the Etherpad, and I'll send you an invite via Google+. Okay, that's me out. Going to mute myself now, and I'll let Braun take over. Thanks, Braun.
Thanks, Joyce. And just so people know, a technical point, we can have 7 people in this discussion live, and we are following questions in the Etherpad. So if while we're speaking you have a question on this topic, then you can throw it into the Etherpad, and we'll be watching out for those to answer them. So even if you're not on voice, but if there are people we can bring into the call, we'd love to hear your opinion on that, and I'm sure Natalie, for one, I'd love you to join this first topic if you're able to jump onto Google+, and Joyce is going to bring anyone in who's interested. Now, the topic that I suggested, because it's one that comes up all the time, is how are open badges going to be different to grades? And are we just swapping one extrinsic reward for another? Aren't they just the same thing? Can we just slide a grade over into being a badge? And I have my own opinion on this, but I think I want to ask the people who are assembled first to have their say on what they feel about that. So, Dean, I'm going to ask you first. Do you think it's as easy as that? Can we just swap a grade for a badge?
No, the area that I began to get interested in with this was in that kind of soft credentialing. So there's those sort of skills, work skills or community skills, being someone that can support others when people are struggling. There's a whole range of things that people do as humans. So being a fixer of a problem, lots of things that you can do, especially if you're doing project-based learning or more group-based work that often people don't see. So I think that it enables people that maybe feel that they're not sort of academically strong as being their primary strength to find a way in which they can either build some agency or some confidence or improve their reputation with their peers. And I think that then they can take that from one space to another space. So I guess if you compare this with term-to-term high school type operations with subject to subject, the grade that you got in geography in term 1 really doesn't translate to anything you might be doing in woodworking in term 3. So there might be skills which the students can take from one place to another, reputation that they can take, it ties into my gaming interests, and I think also it helps with that, I don't know what you call it, a wicker man kind of building that sometimes goes on between teachers in staff rooms about how kids are represented. I think it gives kids especially a big chance to represent themselves and say, well, actually, this is things that I can do and I'm really quite good at. So, I mean, not every child is geared up towards academic, I wouldn't say success, but that's not their primary reason for enjoying schooling, for example. So, yeah, so I don't see there's a great deal of correlation between open badges and grades at all. I just think it's probably more a case that people are concerned that if I start to introduce a new way of credentialing or assessing or putting labels on students, that those things are going to be seen as serious. So, whereas grades are obviously very serious business. So I think there's a cultural gap that we all need to kind of narrow between what we're doing. But at the same time, I think that it really open badges to me just really opens up the prospect of people being able to just show what they can do and do well in new ways. And to me, that just seems like a good idea.
I think I'm old enough to remember when we had national core competencies, and when I was working in TAFE before I went into university and into the university sector, and you described many of those: teamwork, leadership, what today may be suggested as soft skills. And I don't think in a lot of our grades or accreditation systems that we currently have, we have a good way of recognising those. A point that this question triggers for me is when I went to Wollongong University to do my PhD, I had done research subjects at Sydney University, and I had my academic transcript from my master's with me, and I took that, and they said, well, we can't tell from this, from your grades, what subjects you covered in research in order to move into the PhD program. So while they had grades, and they were all good grades, I might add, they didn't translate to something that they could know what I'd mastered in terms of research skills. So in that first year of my PhD study, I had to audit a number of research subjects so that they knew I was on the same page in terms of qualitative research and quantitative research skills. And so that's a really good case in point, I think, where our systems of credentialing currently fall very short in terms of interoperability. For one academic institution to look at the grades of someone, and even if they know the subject titles, it really doesn't show what I've mastered in doing, research 501 at another institution. And I was thinking, how useful would that have been if open badges had been available to really demonstrate what sat behind those grades and what mastery I had of those particular things beyond just a number as a grade. So that's a really key point for me in thinking about how we can translate this to an open system where all of our institutions can understand and employers can understand what I might have mastered. If I'm going for a research job in industry, people will want to know what it is, not just the grade, the A grade or excellence level. Natalie, what do you think?
I have two people playing Connect Sports in my lounge room, so I hope I'm not too loud. You can kick me out if I am, but they're very good little guinea pigs to watch in this whole learning process and gamification. I often refer to them, so they're worth the noise and the joy they bring me. I've just started a project with my class of 21, which is a huge class, and I've come up with a Game of Thrones type of scenarios based on somebody called Mr. Minato. He's got an hour-long YouTube video. I'll try to find the link and share it with you. And he's been doing something in his class that I really admire. And he's not trying to replace grades with badges. He's putting a system alongside the official recognition of skills system using badges. And at the first meeting that we had, Joyce, the speaker from Mozilla, put that idea in my head that instead of competing with the existing system, we just put something in next to it. And I do believe that eventually that system will crumble and be replaced by this system, but it's a really nice transition point. So yesterday I've broken the group into houses, the House of Martell, the House of Nomadic Bastards, and the House of something else. So 5 people in each group, and I asked them to write a code of conduct for this semester, and they come up with things like don't take your shoes off because your feet might smell, and wear deodorant, and all the typical classroom type behaviours that annoy people. So now they're going to be badges and penalties. So I just started refining the list tonight, and I'll take it to them tomorrow, and I'll say that they can earn house points for exhibiting the behaviours that your team requires for us to learn, and penalties for misuse and abuse and distracting other students. So it's going to have nothing to do with their grades, but all to do with their focus and their contribution to their team.
How would you see what you're doing there as different to? I've seen people using a thing called Class Dojo, which sits on the interactive whiteboard that people seem to use as a behaviour management tool. So how do you see what you're doing as doing something different to that, for example?
It's very similar, and my children actually came home and asked me to give them dojos because their teacher here in our tiny little town found Class Dojos and is using it. So we now use it as a behaviour management system in our household, and Mummy gets dojos too. But we negotiate what dojos are for. So if you can get ready to go to school and remember that you need socks and shoes, I'm really, really delighted, and you've got a happy mummy, and you get a dojo for that. And I'm upping the ante all the time. So if you can actually remember the whole 5 things, teeth, bags, shoes, socks, without me telling you, now you'll get a dojo. So it's very similar. Except that they want me to put in penalties and negatives, and I've said no, I'm only giving positives in Class Dojo. My children don't understand my philosophy, but they've got to put up with it.
For people who don't know, Class Dojo is a behaviour management program that's been very popular in schools, and most teachers, it does have positive rewards and negative reinforcement as well. Most teachers don't use any of the negative reinforcement that's used in the system. But interestingly, Class Dojo won the Gamification Summit Best Educational Gamification Product, and that was a crowdsourced voting. So it's a very popular product in many areas of education, and the teacher can decide and the kids can decide what the things are that are going to be respected or desirable behaviours. So it's quite a popular program. So Joyce, for you, what's the difference between open badges and grades?
Well, I think when we do grades, and you know, remember I'm in higher ed, so you get issued grades much more slowly than perhaps in school where there are regular tests, etc. But in the university, in a typical semester, you might have, you know, 3 assessment moments, 3 maybe 4, but it would get pretty crowded. And I think the difference with those is that they're usually quite complex assignments, or they can be complex assignments, particularly if they're like projects. And so in a way, they're almost like a collection of different activities, different learning activities that that student needs to do. And I think for me, when I think about it, then each of those learning activities could be awarded with a different badge, and that way, even if you maybe failed the project because you weren't able to see it fully through, or you know, what if you were working in a group and some of the group members were slacking, etc. If you were still able to take some of those badges forward, I think what it allows a learner to do is not have to bite off this really massive chunk of an assignment, but actually be able to take it into bite-sized pieces and not feel like, you know, they didn't perform just because they were unable to take on this entire piece of work. So I think in that way there's some possibilities there. And I think also it allows us to actually recognize skills and achievements that people have that we don't usually even include in the assignment. And I think that's one of the things that most universities who I've heard, you know, who I've talked to, and where I've been talking to people about open badges, you know, that this first kind of thing that they're doing is looking at graduate learning outcomes and awarding students for that, because it's something that we always say we do. You know, we write it into the course documents, and there it is. You know, in this course, you will learn how to do an oral presentation. But what did that person actually do? You know, and you know, what they get is big tick mark, big badge at the end of the course saying you passed the course. But you, as somebody who knows that they passed the course, don't actually know what skill they've now got. So it's almost more granular, I would say, than just getting a big badge at the end of the semester. And so I certainly don't think that they are interchangeable. I do wonder whether if you go to a badge system and if you really took that as your lead, whether you might actually do away with grades. And I know this is, you know, controversial, but I just wonder whether, you know, then excellence would come from somebody who goes really deep or who goes really broad, and the amount of badges or the types of badges that they've got actually show that. So it's I think it's an interesting. It'll be interesting to see how, you know, formal how that is taken up in formal education, I think.
I think it's interesting that badges in general throw a spanner in the works. They're disruptive, and they give us an opportunity to rethink how it is we assess, how it is we recognise learning, how it is we recognise mastery, and accredit that. And I think that's really quite fascinating. I know of 2 institutions in the United States where the students are creating the badges for their course as they come in each year, and the lecturer works with them to create the badges for the course that they care about, the things they care about learning and mastering in the course. And I think that's fascinating. I like also something that really excites me is the whole notion of social gifting of badges. Because in a university, it's a lecturer who gives you the grade. In a class, it's a teacher that gives you the grade. But I think open badges offer an opportunity for people to recognise each other and the skills, the mentoring, the leadership that you may have exhibited and someone else has appreciated. And I think that's a space that that I think is really ripe and juicy to start thinking about how we can shift that power as well from the leadership in education issuing the badges to how we can actually look at them as socially created by the learners, or the system that includes the learners and the teachers.
Yeah, and I'll just Let me see, am I open? Yes. And one of the things that people are talking about here in the Etherpad is the whole idea of RPL and how important it is with that. And I know that Deakin is doing some work with that, where they're actually issuing badges at the moment of RPL. And I think some of the other universities might not realize just how sneaky that is, because they are awarding a certificate of theirs in order to recognize learning that somebody did somewhere else. Now, when we were at NetHui last week, Mike Dickerson, who I think might be coming along to one of these pretty soon, but he's been working in education for a long time, and he was basically saying, oh, you know, the demise of education and the universities are going to become credentialing places. And I don't think we're quite there, and suddenly all of our structures, you know, are not pointing in that direction. But you could see where badges really could be a place where, you know, like you're actually taking that recognition and almost uncoupling it from the learning experience. So people do the learning experience and then they get the badge, you know, after showing the criteria. And the two things don't necessarily need to happen at the same time or in the same environment. So I think that's really interesting. You know, in a way, that's what Doug is doing with the web literacy badges, which is that you simply have to show that you have at one point created a resource that you issued with an open license. But he's provided a few resources if you don't know how to do that, that will help you on the way. But essentially, that's not what he's issuing. He's only doing the credentialing with web literacy badges. So you see where those things are kind of being divorced, and that's, I think, really interesting, because it means that it makes space for different types of educational experience or learning experiences to start happening. Yeah, I'll just see whether I can follow the Etherpad. Just a second.
Oh, okay, I'll just jump in. I think Leo was trying to get into the Hangout. Taking up that idea of the credentialing, getting into university, I think one of the things which I always found strange when I first started working in higher education was that some of the stuff in Australia that you might have done at TAFE, some of the diploma stuff, was often quite in depth, and I was, you know, especially around things like computer animation and all the gaming subjects. And there's lots of things you can do at TAFE, which is very competency based. And you actually, I think that when you get RPL or recognition of prior learning into your university course, I'm not sure how well that represents your actual true skill set. So I think that whilst we're looking for new pathways to move people around in education, I think that these badges really could start quite early, especially in high school, and actually could really help students get into the things that they want to get into. So it's those courses which are quite competitive, and I think having an open badge that says I can do this in this particular software, I produce this kind of video, or I'm able to do a whole range of things, begins to challenge the idea of e-portfolios as well. So that's probably a little bit off topic, but I do see that the RPL for going into even to higher education can begin at a much younger age, and that really a lot of the badging that I would think that students can do, it could begin at a really early age and then be sort of iterated and changed up as they get through schooling. So I think the challenge is to find a kind of badge system that's meaningful enough for young people to want to do it, but then remains meaningful enough that by the time they get to late adolescence, that they can make some choices about going to college or going to tech college or going to uni, wherever they want to go, or even the workplace. But how do you create something that has that amount of longevity?
I think there's two things I'd pick up on that, and I think number one, RPL, TAFE has done that really well for a long time. Higher ed hasn't really coped very well with recognising learning from anywhere other than their own institution. As I said, I was made to audit subjects because I didn't do my research subjects in that university. And I think that's kind of fascinating. But also I know from teaching in the undergraduate education program, lots of students come in with varied computer skills or web literacy, as you mentioned, Joyce. And if they'd earned badges earlier in their high school years, universities can target courses and training better to students who need them, or if there's remedial work needed for students to come up to scratch in researching online or doing those sorts of things, because some students will have adopted all those skills very capably in their high school years, but there's no translation towards their studies in the future. So I think, it's that whole notion of being able to pull in competencies from all over to build your own degree, as it were, or build your own learning trajectory out of the competencies you've developed in wherever they come from.
I think so. I went recently with my just turned teenaging son, and we went to the Film and Animation and Gaming Institute in Sydney, which is a private college that does TAFE-like vet courses and diplomas for the interactive game industry. And there was so many parents there that were trying to get 13 and 14-year-olds into their program. It was kind of amazing. But one of the things that they were saying down there was that they have a lot of students that enroll in that course at the same time as doing their own projects, and at the same time as actually studying at university as well. So where they're offering very bespoke expert advice on particular programs that industry actually wants and things that people actually want to employ people for. They were saying they had a lot of students that wanted to have both. They wanted to have university education about the theory of game design or interactive media and a whole range of things they wanted to get there, which wouldn't fit into the interactive schools academic type situation. But it was very interesting that I sat there and I thought, well, open badges is one way in which you could at least begin to describe some of the connections between all of these things.
I like some of the comments Roger's made on the moped, about there's nothing inherently intrinsic in badges, but it's how they're used that can be. And also the comment that maybe that's a way for universities to start looking at what they can do course-wide or even institution-wide, because students swap between subjects or do double degrees and all sorts of different combinations these days. So are there learning awards or learning competencies that we should be considering, more generic ones that could be part of an open badge? About there's nothing inherently intrinsic in badges, but it. Sorry, we're getting lag back there on someone else, on another Leo's computer, I think, maybe, but I'm good now.
Yeah, it's okay. I've just muted him. When he came into the room, his mic was unmuted. And once you speak, Leo, we might be getting some feedback. So if you've got a headset or something, that would be great. But it might work as well. So let you know.
Can I just quickly add something about how my students cope with badges and as opposed to grades? When we give them a qualification that has Roman numerals on it to start with, my students don't know no Roman numerals, and yet we still talk about Cert 3s and Cert 4s in terms they don't understand. We don't give them a nice pretty blue certificate until 3 months or so after they've finished. They're lucky if they'll get it in the mail, and then they don't understand it. In very tiny print at the top, it might say more study is required to get this qualification, and they don't know that there's a second pretty blue piece of paper arriving that looks a little bit different to your academic transcript. And it doesn't matter how I say it and what I do, I can't communicate to my students when they're finished. Why are you here? What are you going to get to represent your achievement, and how does that get you anywhere in life? So I don't try anymore. I'm hoping that badges will give them more of that instant feedback and granular feedback so that they've got the confidence to go out into the world and get the jobs in digital media, because those TAFE qualifications are nowhere near as important as the portfolios that I'm helping them to create and the badges that they'll be able to show in their backpacks.
Thanks, Natalie. Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that they were finding, certainly at that age, with some of the Cities of Learning, well, with the Summer of Learning and then the Cities of Learning programs that they've been running, which is that, it's difficult to explain to the students, but what they found, particularly with the Chicago Summer of Learning, for instance, was that they set up a backpack dedicated to the students with where they would keep the badges that they earned during that program, during the summer of learning. And then, but what they found was that once the summer of learning project was over, students would go and take a NASA, go and earn NASA badges or other programs, and they would go back to their Chicago Summer of Learning backpack, because that is where, to them, their learning, the evidence of their learning actually lives. And that's a really interesting thing, and that's a very, that's a big abstract thing, but the act of having earned those badges and having put them in the backpack has given them that learning as, hey, there is a place where I actually keep this, where that evidence sits. And I think that's a really powerful experience. And as somebody was saying that academics, Roger was saying, academics won't accept badges for entry until they use them themselves. And I think you're absolutely right. And there would be very easy ways of getting that started with some of the PD that academics have to do. But I think another powerful opportunity there is because academics, there's so much casualization in higher education, and academics have to move around quite a lot. And I think as a university, you can almost tie people to you by being that place or offering them that place where they keep the learning. And I think that goes for alumni as well as your staff, as well as your casual staff, because of course your casual staff, even though you might not be given the contract, they could also go somewhere else and tutor somewhere else or be an adjunct somewhere else next year. But if you're offering them ongoing PD and you're offering a way of evidencing that learning, then you continue to create that tie between you. So I think it's really interesting. I think there's a lot of knock-on effects from providing the backpack for people, in terms of them conceptualizing where their learning sits as well. Currently, my learning is a rolled up papyrus roll that's sitting somewhere in the bottom of my wardrobe. I'm not engaged with it at all. But then I've got this backpack, which I've got displayed across lots of different social media profiles. So an interesting thing, I think.
Joyce, just logistics. I noticed a few people have joined us in the moped, and they may not know to go to the very top and put their name in so they don't show up as unnamed. Because we have a few new people who've come into the call, and we really appreciate all the comments. And don't forget that the moped is a very interactive document, so if you've got questions or issues, raise them. But I think it might be time to wrap on this topic and move on.
Yeah, we've got Leo here, so I'd like to hear from him because he was putting something really important about Experience API. Just a little bit as well, if people can help us out in keeping that a dynamic document by actually helping us take notes. So as we're talking and you hear something interesting, you might just type it in there because that helps everyone to kind of capture the conversation as well. Or if you hear about a link, and I see that Dean was just doing that as well. So yeah, it's a collaborative note-taking document, the Etherpad. Leo, are you ready to talk to us about this thing that you were talking about, open badges, formal learning, and the Experience API?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. You're loud and clear.
I hope there's no feedback. Unfortunately, I wasn't set up for this today, so I haven't got a headset with me. So if there's any feedback, just let me know.
It sounds as if you're sitting in the room next to me. It's great.
Okay, that's good. Look, from our perspective, I mean, we do a lot of work in the vet sector and enterprise learning. So the topics that were covered by you guys are fairly similar in terms of soft skills. In our instance, are probably called informal learning. RPL is very much a necessity in the vet sector as well. So we're covering the same problem areas really. What we have to deal with at the moment, especially in the enterprise side of things, the SCORM standard has been sunsetted and been replaced by a new standard called Experience API, and that from a technical point is really well suited for informal learning. So being able to capture learning from multiple devices, that could be mobiles, but also could be machines. Providing analytics in terms of what tasks particular users do constantly, so you could extrapolate from that a particular skill set. So that's sort of where the Experience API will be collecting a lot of data, and then we are hoping to use open badges to be actually display these kinds of soft or informal learning skills. And the other area that you guys have covered is really, for me, the portability of those badges, that you can actually take them from one organization to the other.
Yeah, I absolutely agree that that is really important and increasingly more important. And a lot of companies have developed their own badges. I mean, Khan Academy does badges, and
Yep.
and then Deloitte has got their own internal employee badge system. But if you're an Deloitte employee, you can't take those with you if you want to go work for another big consulting firm. And I think that's a bit short-sighted, but it also kind of says, I don't really care what you do, once you leave our company. And so, and of course, these days people change jobs so often that what you want to do is form a partnership with your company that works to your mutual benefit. So I think the open badges, and that would be an easy swap to make as well. So I think that's where the open badges are really strong, because of the way they almost, and Bron and I were talking about this yesterday, in a way they're almost like the higher ground of badges. They're almost like a more ethical way to do badges. And one of the things that I was going to talk about today, and I don't know that we'll get around to it, but was the whole idea between e-portfolios and badges. And one of the things, of course, that e-portfolios have always failed at, we've been using them for a long time, but we never really had a good way of sharing them between different platforms. And of course, that's where open badges started. It started with, let's have the standard, and then build on it. So, which I think is going to make it travel a lot further. So, yeah, I'm still not sure that I quite get what Experience API does.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's a bit outside of the topic. And in terms of the e-portfolios, you took the words right out of my mouth. That was actually the next sentence I was going to say. It's a promise that e-portfolios are always made but never delivered on, is the portability of the information. Experience API unfortunately adds another three-letter acronym to the whole EdTech scenario. They create a LRS, which stands for Learning Record Store behind the scenes. Now, that might actually sound scary, is actually a very good reason for it, and is designed to be really a back-end data store that's not actually visible to students or staff, for that matter. And it can actually then sit behind other systems such as LMSs, and in future maybe replace some of those and make them not necessary. So really, it's a big data store for learning experiences, if you want to bring it down to one sentence.
Yeah, I've looked into Experience API and got some test servers, and I'm really excited about what it potentially could bring if it all works out that way. And the other thing that I just presented at Moodle in Cairns was the outcome sets being brought into Moodle 2.8, and the new logging features in Moodle 2.8 that use the same verb set as the Experience API. And there's more and more companies like Moodle that are getting this dictionary of learning type experiences, so attempted, succeeded, completed, viewed, played. There's about 200 of them. But what's really crucial for me is that we're all agreeing on what word to use to represent what action, and we're creating a shared vocabulary around a learning experience that's the opposite to giving somebody a PhD or a diploma. It's giving people a statement at the very smallest level that we all globally agree on what that means, and then collecting those statements together to the point where you can say, yes, I have that skill. It's much easier for tracking and reporting, and it's taking learning to a whole new level that SCORM never even attempted to do, because it was basically a score out of 100 and pass or fail. And this the people behind Experience API have done a lot of research to realise what we need. It'll be really exciting to see how it gets implemented over the next few years.
Yeah, in that flexibility is unfortunately there's a lot of danger. I think you're perfectly right with the verb sets, but getting people to really agree on a common set of these verbs is going to be the challenge, I think.
Yeah, and I think I mean, and then there's the question of how does that sit together with all of the learning design work that's been done over in Europe? Was it the Cyprus Accord that it was some island, the Cyprus Accord that they've signed, where they all agreed that there was going to be, a standard way of referring to different learning design elements, and whether that's been taken into account as well. So it's been attempted. Never successfully, but I think in this day where we can track so much and we can learn so much from tracking that data, I think the time has come for learning to kind of catch up with that and for us to be able to do that, but preferably seamlessly. So far it's been quite hard for learners. You have to go into Moodle, you have to do this, and we're really kind of making them step through hoops rather. And what you would really want is for that to be happening kind of behind the scenes as they go through a project or as they go through an experience. So I think that'll be the trick as well.
Joyce.
If I guess because you bring up the experience API versus SCORM, which is, I guess it rather than getting those two specific details, it does bring up that question of who's going to create this stuff. And I think we're in an era where there's a big push in all sectors for the teacher to generate more and more and more complicated credentialing or all sorts of things, whether it's quizzes or whatever. But how do you think trying to implement this new global UN standard almost of credentialing, how easy do you think that's going to be for your average classroom punter to tackle themselves and not actually have to go out to an expert to get it done?
Yeah,
well,
sorry. Go for it.
Oh, I'm just saying that I've been saying for a long time that, like a lot of places you go to, people are always saying, what we need to do is we just need to upskill teachers. We just need to do this, to do that. And I think, the time has come for us to just realize that to deliver high quality learning is a much more complex job than that. And it actually takes a whole team with people with different skill sets to make that achievable. And we can't, like for instance in my own context, higher education, we can't just keep adding more tasks to the unit chair role. So I'm just going to let everyone respond quickly, but I'm also aware that we are running out of time. We're going to run till 8 o'clock Australia time, 10 o'clock New Zealand time, and the Kiwis will want to go to bed. So I'll let the other thing roll over, and I just want to say that for those of you who are going to leave us early, the next call will be on Wednesday the 30th of July at the same time. So just for those people nipping out early. Also at the bottom of the Etherpad, you can add any topics that you would like to add or any speakers that you would like to hear from. So we're keen to get your input on that. All right, I'll just give it back to you, Buzz. Oh no, have I killed the conversation? Sorry, guys. I guess the question was, how easy is it going to be for the whole world to adopt a common language of learning? And I think really, really hard. And I think in a way that's the interesting thing with Mozilla's approach to this, which is like we'll develop the standard and then kind of let it loose on the world and see who adopts it, rather than shoving it down people's throats. And it's also interesting that a lot of their projects actually focus on the younger generation. I wonder whether they've just written off the older generation. They're waiting for other people to come along and who are used to lifelong learning and who are used to badges.
I was just thinking that dialects and... Sorry, Ron. Go.
I was just going to say, where do you think the pressures for this will come from greatest? Because from where I see it, working in the gamification area, I work listen to a lot of people working in enterprise and industry, and they would like a better understanding of what people have learnt or mastered in their formal education and what they actually bring to their job. And likewise, I think there's a lot of high-quality learning happening in industry and enterprise that isn't recognised. So I'm wondering if this might be pressure from several prongs on formal academic education coming from industry and coming from the learners themselves as a way to articulate their learning better. That's my 2 cents worth. I think education's going to be dragged kicking and screaming into looking at open badges.
Yeah. So for the next community call, which will be the Wednesday, the 30th of July, so 2 weeks from today, we have actually got someone in from tertiary, from Charles Sturt University in Wagga Wagga, where they have been running an open badges project, and he's just going to share with us what they've been working on. So it'll be good, and we'll get to kind of ask him those hard questions. Although obviously he'll only know about his institution and not the others. But it'll be interesting to hear that approach and to see what kinds of questions they were struggling with. Okay, let me just see. All right, it's nearly time. I just want to make sure that that everyone is aware that everyone did sign the roll call. For those people who came in late, we'd love to know who exactly you are. So at the top of the Etherpad, there is a roll call where you can just fill out your details and share as many details as you like. It is an open document, so anybody can go in and take a look at that. So share as many personal details as you like, but we'd love to hear from you. And if you're willing to, if you help us run these sessions, or if you've got topics that you would like to suggest, we'd love to hear from you, and you can also leave it there in the Etherpad.
Could I just introduce Giri to this little community? He's popped in. Giri, he's been working on, I met him through the advanced gamification workshop I did with Gabe Zickerman. I did the Sydney one and he did one somewhere else near India, but we're both working on the same assessment, and we started connecting and giving each other some feedback along the way. And he sent me some print screens through of an absolutely fantastic system that connects Drupal and Moodle with their HR system that offers people in their company a learning journey that's totally gamified. So I've suggested that he might want to be a speaker one day at one of these meetings. He has some fantastic views and opinions. So everybody introduce you to Giri.
Yeah, that sounds great, Giri, and we'd love to see your details there, and a link to your blog if you've got a blog or some place where we can see your work. And I think anyway, with so many expert gamification people, between Giri, yourself, Moodle Muse, Natalie, and Dean and Braun, I think it's almost imperative upon us to do one around gamification and open badges. So yeah, definitely, we'll put that on the schedule. With that, I just want to thank Braun and Dean for coming along and helping me to run these sessions and pick them up again and help me facilitate them. And thanks also to everyone who came in to the Google Hangout. Natalie and Leo for just jumping in like that. Thank you. That's great. And also for everyone who's been contributing in the Etherpad. That's all really, really helpful. Remember that it'll stay open. You can go back in to find all of those resources, or if there are things that you would like to add, you can certainly add them as well. And I'll be setting up the Etherpad for the next meeting pretty soon and share that all through the OBANZ Twitter and Google page. So for those of you who haven't followed us yet, the Twitter handle is OB_ANZ. Unfortunately, OBANZ was already taken. But also, if you'd like to continue this conversation in Twitter in between sessions, just use the OBANZ hashtag to kind of chat with each other and share any resources that you would like or ask questions. And the Open Badges hashtag is also always there, of course. This is really, for you. So if there are particular topics that you would love to hear from you. Okay, thanks everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Brilliant. Thanks, Joyce, and thanks everybody.
Thanks, Joyce.
Bye, everybody. Great to catch up. See you soon.